shakalaka, boom shakalaka, boom shakalaka, boom boom. I am a man with big muscly, boom 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 boom. The biggest of muscles in the world. I fight against evil. I am Evil Knievel, and I will win every war. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy, and welcome back to another episode of Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading pages number 41 to 58, because I don't know how to count to 20. We are reading the book Five Nights at Freddy's Tales from the Pizzaplex, number 2, Happs, Help is on the way, look at the robot. However, inside this book there are 3 books. In reality, we are on page 41 of Help Wanted. This should be the final episode of Help Wanted. If I do say so myself, which I do say so myself. So, let us begin on this grand journey to read Five Nights at Freddy's Tales from the Pizzaplex, number 2, Happs. Seriously,
without further ado,
let's begin.
He sat on the bed and tried to slow things down. Do you want me to look out in the hall? Victoria asked. No, Steve yelled louder than he meant to. The snakes will get in. I think we're okay with the door closed. I don't think any will get underneath it. His wife looked at him with a mixture of fear and pity. I think the stress of developing these games is getting to you, sweetheart. That and the financial pressure and the fact that we've not been able to leave the house for so long. But I promise you, honey, there can't be snakes in the hallway. It's wintertime. The snakes are hibernating. The ones in our hallway aren't, Steve said. They're wide awake. Look, I understand what you don't think of this as real. He started unbuttoning his pajama top. But look at these. You can't tell me these aren't real. He held out a scratch, cut, and punctured bare arms. Oh, my poor darling, Victoria said, unshed tears sparkling in her eyes. Just a second. I'll be right back. She disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a tube of antibiotic ointment. He sat next to him on the bed and started dabbing the medicine on his cuts and scrapes. As soon as the snow melts, we're going to get you some help. He knew she didn't mean regular medical help. She meant psychiatric help. He didn't believe him. He was going to be the one person whose trust he counted on, and she didn't believe him. Steve put his head in his hands. He had lived in a lonely life before Victoria and the kids, but somehow he had never felt more alone than he did right now. Lie down, Victoria said, gently pushing him back on the head. You need to rest. Steve lay down. He did not rest, even though he was cast as quiet now. The high-pitched ringing in the head was deafening. In the morning, Steve's head still ringing. He opened the bedroom door and felt a great deal of trepidation, expecting to see a floor swarming with snakes, but the floor looked completely normal, and there was no hole in the wall in a spot where, Steve remembered, the serpent-like creature poking out its head. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe he did need some help. The smells of coffee and bacon were wafting from the kitchen, and Steve was surprised to find the aromas pleasant, despite the damaged emotional state. Besides, he had to eat to keep up his strength. He had to work to finish the games. If he finished the games, they'd have the money to leave, if the snowstorm ever stopped. Victoria was standing at the stove of their bathroom, simultaneously scrambling eggs and tending to a pan of sizzling bacon. The kids were already at the table with their glasses of orange juice. They were always in such a good mood in the morning. Victoria smiled at them as if everything was normal. Get us some coffee, why don't you? She said. The radio was on, and it seemed that these days that they would keep track of the weather. After disconcertingly happy-sounding pop songs finished playing, the DJ said, DJ Dan the Music Man here, and I've got good news and bad news, folks. The good news is that the chance of precipitation today is just 30%, but the bad news is the temperature won't go above 30 degrees. We might not get any more snow, but the snow we do have isn't going anywhere. So stay inside and stay safe, and I'll keep spinning tunes to keep you happy. And now, by special request, here's the latest hit from Sailor Thrift. Steve's hands shook as he lifted the pot, poured in the coffee into cups. He put milk in Victoria's coffee the way she liked it and sat down with the kids. He tried to act normal, and the way he was failing. What's wrong, Daddy? Abigail asked. There you had it. He could act normal enough to fool a 4-year-old. Nothing, honey, he said. I'm just tired. I didn't sleep well last night. Why? Avery asked. He was getting into the why stage. Because there's monsters in the wall, Steve thought. But there's no way he's going to say that to a 2-year-old. Instead, he said, I don't know, buddy. Sometimes I just can't sleep. He ate the bacon and eggs and toast mechanically. The same way he put gas into his car. He needed fuel to keep going, to do what he had to do, which was finish the games. As soon as he swallowed the last mouthful of food, he chugged the remains of the coffee cup and got up and to climb the ladder to work. Then he first started working on the games, climbing the ladder into the attic, which felt like he was entering the darkness. A horrific world he was creating on the screen. He sat in a windowless attic in the stark contrast to the happiness and light radiated by his wife and children in the rest of the house. But now the darkness was spilling over into everything, and the only time the high-pitched ringing in his head stopped was when he was working on the game. Or maybe it didn't stop, but the game was the only thing that distracted him from the sound. The hours fell away as Steve worked. He was on the game number 3 now. When Victoria called him up again, it was time for lunch. So when he emerged, when he jumped back into gas, he had started a monster instead of his wife. Not hungry? He called back. Going to work all until dinner time? Okay, Victoria replied. Let me know if you need anything. He didn't answer because he had already fallen back into the game. Victoria made spaghetti for dinner again, with garlic bread. Abigail and Avery, for their mouths and chins dark with sauce, slurped the long noodles and giggled. Victoria was always some kind of supportive, and her cooking was always delicious. Even now, he was limited to her pantry ingredients because they had been snowed in for so long. The children were great, too. They were charming and cheerful, never fought like Steve with his siblings when he was a kid. Steve knew he would have a perfect life with them if they could just get away from this place, the snowbound house of horrors that was quite possibly was driving him insane. But he has the power to get them out, he reminded himself. He was over halfway finished with the game. You're quiet tonight, Victoria said. Sorry, Steve whirled some spaghetti around with his fork. I'm just having a hard time getting my head out of the game. Is it going well? She asked, reaching over to dab at Avery's orange face with a napkin. Steve nodded. No matter how unstable and terrified he is of his regular life, somehow his work on the games was really good. Can we play with them when they're ready? Abigail asked. You can play with them when you're a little older, Steve said. Right now they're too scary for you. Sometimes I feel like they're too scary for me, too. Abigail and Avery giggled. To them, the idea of growing up being scared was so unimaginable that it was funny. After the kids had bathed and gone to bed, Victoria and Steve cuddled on the couch, with the radio playing softly in the background. Even with the volume lowered, Steve could hear DJ Dan's familiar voice saying, Even more snow tonight, folks. It looks like we're going up to have a white Valentine's Day. If we keep that up at this rate, we might have a white St. Patrick's Day, too. Because he was stuck in the house at some time, the dates tended to run together. Steve had forgotten the next day was Valentine's Day. I'm so sorry that I've not been able to get you anything for Valentine's Day, Steve said as he stroked Victoria's lustrous hair. Victoria laughed. There's no need to apologize. You can't go shopping for cards when you get out of the house. The kids are going to make cards for us out of construction paper tomorrow. Maybe you can make me one, too. Just be neater and glitterier than they are. Cleaning up the stuff is a nightmare. They deserve more than a car, Steve said, swept up as she often was by Victoria's sheer wonderfulness. It was rare for a person to be equally beautiful on the outside and the inside as she was. You deserve red roses and chocolates and a nice piece of jewelry. Shh, Victoria said, putting her index finger suddenly against the lip. You're the only Valentine's Day present I need. I have no idea how I got so lucky, Steve said. Victoria smiled. I feel the same way. The radio was playing a song that Steve had already heard twice that day. It was already the problem with Top 40 radio. They played the same songs over and over. And to be honest, he was getting a little sick of DJ Dan, too. Didn't that station have any other DJs? DJ Dan seemed to be work all hours of the night and day. Steve stood up and walked over to the window where the radio sat on the sill. Hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to change the station. Oh, don't do that, said Victoria. Her tone sounded casual on the surface, but there was tension underneath. Why not, Steve said. He was already fiddling with the knob. I'm not in the mood for some classic rock, and I'm sure any station we listen to will have updates on the weather. But he couldn't seem to find any other station. When he turned it away at the usual pop station, there wasn't even static, only silence. Huh, that's weird. That's what I was trying to tell you, Victoria said. Started to get a signal out here in the country. For some reason, that pop station's the only one we get reliably. Well, we really are in the middle of nowhere, aren't we? Steve said, giving up and turning back on the pop station. No cell phone service, one radio station. Yeah, Victoria said. I like it. It's peaceful. Steve had felt anything but peaceful lately, but I don't ever feel trapped, especially right now when we've been snowed in so long. Victoria smiled. Well, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't like to be able to go to the store and maybe grab a pizza somewhere. But overall, I think being snowed in with you and the kids is cozy. Steve couldn't believe she got so lucky. Why would a woman like Victoria even give him the time of day? Well, there's no one I'd rather be snowed in than you. They kissed and Victoria said, I think I'm going to bed. How about you? Steve's stomach became a knot of tension as he rather lying awake in bed and listening to the noises, waiting to see if something could burst out of the walls. Waiting to see if monsters just waited to scare him or do him lasting, maybe lethal harm. I'll be along in a bit, he said. Well, don't stay up all night, Victoria said, getting up from the couch. Sleep deprivation isn't good for the health, physical or mental. I know, Steve said. He was shaky, exhausted, and in a dead panic most of the time. He didn't even be told his physical and mental health were suffering. Believe me, I know. Promise, I'll try to keep some sleep tonight. Once Victoria was gone, he was lost his safety net and had been plunged into darkness, where he was scraping sound on the walls, like something with sharp claws inside of them. The ringing in his head became too loud to drown out the music of the radio. He could sit there and be alone. It was so much worse when he was alone. The only time he could hear to be alone was when he was working on the game. He was in the last game now, but he was seeing it through, and he should go to bed. Even though he knew he wouldn't sleep, at least Victoria would be there beside him. As he walked down the hall, the walls pulsated with the ceiling buckled so the underside of the hammock. The lowest part of the ceiling cracked, and they opened wider, and a hole emerged a spider the size of a basketball, which dangled above him in a high tendril web. It was black and hairy, fanged and many-eyed. Beside its fangs were pincers, which it rubbed together menacingly. Steve stood still, afraid to move or even breathe. How would a spider be big? Was it venomous? If it was probably packing enough venom to kill a herd of elephants. And it was a huge spider's abdomen split open. About an opening fell hundreds, maybe thousands of small spiders like candy falling from a piñata. Steve was covered in spiders. They were in his hair, on his face, and on his hands and arms. They were crawling into his ears, his nose, his mouth. He screamed and slapped them with both hands, slapped himself all over and over again, in hopes of squishing him. Victoria came running. What is it? Steve didn't want to talk because he didn't want more spiders to crawl in his mouth, but he managed to say through clenched teeth, "Spiders, they're all over me." Victoria looked confused and still a little alarmed. She took Steve's arms. "No, don't touch me. They'll get on you too." Victoria drew her hands back in a gesture of surrender. "Okay, but come with me. I need to see you in the light." Still slapping himself all over, Steve followed her into the bedroom. He looked them up and down. "Honey, I don't know how to tell you this, but because I know it's the real to you, but I don't see any spiders." "But how can you not? They're all over." Steve looked down his arms and hands and shirt. The spiders were gone. He sat down on the edge of the bed. They were there. They were here. The ringing sound of his head being louder and louder, like an ambulance announcing the presence of an emergency. "This place, it's making me crazy," he said, on the verge of tears. He stood up. "I have to get out of here. I have to get well, even if I'm just going to walk in the snow." "No," Victoria said. "It's too cold out there. He knows too deep. It's not safe." But Steve was already halfway down the hall. The ringing in his head was growing unbearably loud, like the smoke detector designed to wake up everybody in the burning house. The smoke detector. That was exactly what it sounded like. He looked at the smoke detector mounted on the ceiling of the living room, and something inside him said, "You have to disable the smoke alarm." The sound would stop. As the ringing in the head continued, they grabbed the poker from the fireplace and hit the smoke alarm until it knocked down the floor. He continued beating the poker, then jumped up and down on it several times with good measure until it smashed into pieces. But at first there was silence and relief. But then Steve became aware, although it was finally silence at his head, he was still surrounded by noise. There was a dim of ever-present DJ Dan on the radio, rattling about a never-ending snowstorm. But there was another sound, too. It was different from what he was used to hearing in the house, though. It wasn't scraping or scuttling, but a variety of mechanical sounds. The wheels turning, gears grinding. It sounded like he was on the production floor of a small factory. The sounds were the only things that were different. The house looked different, too. The furniture was the same, but there was strand marks on the floor. Hinged trapdoors were on the walls, ceilings, and the exact ways of the creatures that jumped out of them. It was being inside an amusement park's haunted house, and the lights turned on. He was even more worried, but whatever was making his head move toward him in the hallway, he looked around the hiding place, found it ducked into a coat closet. He tried to pull the closet door shut, like every other door in the infernal house. It wouldn't close all the way. He dug around the hangers and coats and jackets. His heart was pounding. "Honey, where are you?" Victoria's called. "You didn't go for a walk in the snow, did you?" Her voice was coming in the living room. You didn't hear footsteps, only motorized whirring sounds. Steve peeked out from between the coats. Standing in the living room was a robot. It was all steel, with visible wires and circuits. The only part of it that was faintly resembled a human was its face, a mask of plastic of feminine feature. "Steve," Victoria's voice was coming from inside the robot. "Steve, I know they must still be here because the snow boots are inside the door. Where are you, sweetheart?" Steve's first thought was seeing the robot was, "What have you done to Victoria, and why have you done her voice?" But it didn't take long for reality set in. The robot hadn't done anything to Victoria. The robot was Victoria, or at least it was been calling to Victoria for the past few weeks and months, or however long he'd been trapped there. Steve felt like he might be sick, but he didn't let himself throw up, and he knew if he threw up he might make a sound, which would ruin his hiding place. He thought of the games of hide and seek he played with his children, full of fun and laughter, so different from the hiding he was doing now. Wait, the children in danger from this terrifying thing they thought it was their mother. I have to save them. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" Abigail's voice called. "Daddy, Daddy," Avery called. Steve peeked out again between the coats, and what he saw made him shiver, though the temperature in the room had just dropped to 40 degrees. The children were robots too, smaller ones, but also plastic faces, with wide robotic eyes and exposed mechanical parts. They moved jerkily around the room behind curtains and under tables, calling "Daddy, Daddy." When Steve didn't respond, the robot stopped using a human voice and began to search more aggressively, with only a soundtrack of whirring machinery and the pop radio station in the background. The three robots picked up the furniture, like it was nothing heavier than a pile of sticks. They opened and looked inside trapdoors, even through the spaces where there's too small for them to hide in. It was only a matter of time until one of them looked inside the coat closet. But what would they do if they found him? Steve feared for his life. The pop song of the radio ended, and then DJ Stan said, "Stay in and stay safe." "Well, everyone except you, Steve." Steve shook his head as if to jar his brain awake. It was impossible. None of it could be happening. "Steve, buddy, you need to come out," the familiar voice from the radio said. "Your family is looking for you. Playtime's over, Steve. Victoria, Abigail, Avery. We're all getting worried about you. You don't want to look where your beautiful wife and children, do you?" Through the coats, he watched the animatronic trio go into the kitchen. He knew he couldn't stay in the coat closet forever. If he made it into the bedroom, he could get to his car keys. He didn't know how or well he'd be able to drive into such a deep snow, but it was the only shot he had, at least to try. He ducked out of the coat closet and ran down the hall toward the bedroom, and he heard the whirring of machinery again. Then he knew in the living room. He darted to the bathroom, stepped into the tub, and pulled the shower curtain in front of him. He was out of breath from exertion and terror. Steve, honey, it was Victoria's voice coming from the hall. Then he heard the sound of mechanical feet in the bathroom tile. The steps grew closer and closer. In one great sweet emotion, the robot's wife ripped the shower curtain from the rings and holding it in place. Steve was exposed, a sitting duck. He looked at the blank plastic face that was looking at him, and then, with more strength than he knew he possessed, he put both of his hands against the robot's cold mechanical shoulders and shoved it as hard as he could. The force threw the robot off balance, making it fall backward. Steve leaped from the tub, ran past the robot. It was already working on righting itself, and made it to the bedroom. It was shutting the door behind him, except the door wasn't really shut. In the hall, he could hear once was the sweet-sounding, now terrifying voices of the children calling, "Daddy, Daddy." Steve leaned against the door with all his weight. He grabbed the wooden chair from Vanity and angled his back against the doorknob in hopes of making the door harder to open. But the door was the only way out of the room. How long could he hold out? The three robots were on the other side of the door, pushing, and he was holding them off for now, but he knew he would be tired. They wouldn't. "Steve, listen up, Steve." Steve heard the direction of the adult male voice to the C radio that has been in the living room, now sitting on the nightstand beside the bed. Had Victoria moved into anticipation of Steve ending up in the bedroom? "Steve, this is your buddy DJ Dan the Music Man." The voice from the radio continued. "I'm here to help you, Steve. You're not going to be able to hold the door, buddy. Your arms are already tired, aren't they?" Steve could feel the muscles of the arm quiver and weaken. He went for spent hours in the gym kind of guy. He was sit hours the computer guy. He knew this strength was no match for robot steel. Still, he tried to hold on. "Steve," the radio continued. "Do you remember when you lived alone in your sad little apartment, working at minimum wage and trying unsuccessfully to get the game off the ground? Do you remember when dinner was microwave burrito, you ate alone, and how sometimes the only lonely you'd go to the bodega and buy something random just to make chit-chat with the cashier?" "I remember," Steve said. "How did the guy on the radio know much about him? And why was the guy on the radio talking to him personally anyway? Was all this stuff real, and how did it really finally reach his breaking point?" "And now to think about how happy you've been since you came here," DJ Dan said, as he soothing voice. "No one has ever had a nicer, more beautiful wife than Victoria. Adorable kid. You always wanted to be a dad. Isn't it great? Isn't it?" "But it's not real," Steve said, his whole body pressed against the door, but the robots were standing on the ground, pushing on the other side. "Sure it is, buddy. Everything you felt with your wife and kids, it was real as it gets. You have to give yourself permission to be happy. But the night terrors, the things in this house, those weren't real. Those were just to inspire you while you were at work on the game. Say the word, and they're gone. Let go of the door, Steve, and I promise that on the other side won't come. You need to stop fighting this and let yourself be happy." There were tears in Steve's eyes. He had to admit the moments of joy they experienced with Victoria and the kids were greater than any happiness he had ever known. But the moments of terror he had experienced in this house were unsurpassed too. Everything here had been much more intense than anything he had come before. He felt like the most important moments in his life had happened here, and yet it had been in this house only a few weeks. "And how do I let myself be happy?" he asked. The voice sounded small, weak. "It's as easy as pushing a button," DJ Dan's voice said. "If you let go of the door and walk over to the radio, you need to press the red button on its side. If you push that button, you have everything you ever dreamed of. The perfect woman you always wanted. The perfect children you always wanted. And guess what? No more pushing mops or scrubbing toilets for you, buddy, because you'll be one of the world's most successful video game developers. That's a lot of happiness for pushing one little button." Steve found himself sounding the door less forcefully. "But it's not real," he said, even though he felt resistance awakening. "Reality is what you make it, Steve," DJ Dan said. "Make it your own reality. Make it beautiful. All you have to do is push the button." Steve thought back on the days pushing and frustration and loneliness. He let go of the door, turned his back, and faced the radio. "You can do it, Steve," DJ Dan's voice urged him. "You have to live a life of bliss. Isn't it a beautiful word? Bliss?" Steve moved closer to the radio, heard a creak in the bedroom door open behind him. There was a red button. All he had to do was push. The fantasy would become reality. It was such a beautiful fantasy. What favors had reality ever done to him? Steve's hand shook, and he reached out toward the window. He pushed the button. The high-pitched ringing filled Steve's head, filled the room. He seemed to fill the whole world. Steve clapped his hands over his ears, but it didn't stop nothing to muffle the horrible cacophony. He fell to his knees as the room started to spin. And then, suddenly, everything was still. Steve used the nightstand to steady himself as he rose to his feet. He looked around the bedroom. Everything looked normal. He even saw her. Victoria was standing in the doorway. Her blue-black hair was a halo around her lovely face. She was wearing the same green dress and wore the first time they met. His favorite dress. He could say he was beautiful the day they met, but they would lie. She'd been even more beautiful. "Victoria," he breathed her name. It was reverent whisper. "Sweetheart," he said. Look at him and love her great freckled brown eyes. He opened her arms to him. This time, Steve didn't hesitate. He went to her. He wrapped his arms around her and pressed her lips against hers. Bliss. That's the perfect word for what he felt feeling. His bliss was so great he barely felt the continuous stabbing in the vicinity of his heart. And so that tells the tale of the mimic.
The mimic.
Alright. Well, now we're on pages 62 to 80, which is actually another 18 episode. 62 to 80. Right? Yep. But yeah, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. If you like, be a fish, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.